If every man is guilty of all the good he did not do, as Voltaire suggested, then I have spent a lifetime convincing myself that I am innocent of all the bad. It has been a convenient way to endure decades of self-imposed exile from the past, to see myself as a victim of historical amnesia, acquitted from complicity and exonerated from blame. My final story begins and ends, however, with something as trivial as a box cutter. Mine had broken a few days earlier, and finding it a useful tool to keep in a kitchen drawer, I paid a visit to my local hardware shop to purchase a new one. Upon my return, a letter was waiting for me from an estate agent, a similar one delivered to every resident of Winterville Court, politely informing each of us that the flat below my own was being put up for sale. The previous occupant, Mr. Richardson, had lived in Flat 1 for some 30 years, but died shortly before Christmas, leaving the dwelling empty. His daughter, a speech therapist, resided in New York, and to the best of my knowledge had no plans to return to London. So I had made my peace with the fact that it would not be long before I was forced to interact with a stranger in the lobby, perhaps even having to feign an interest in his or her life, or be required to divulge small details about my own. Mr. Richardson and I had enjoyed the perfect neighbourly relationship in that we had not exchanged a single word since 2008. In the early years of his residence we had been on good terms, and he had occasionally come upstairs for a game of chess with my late husband, Edgar. But somehow he and I had never moved past the formalities. He always addressed me as Mrs. Fernsby, while I referred to him as Mr. Richardson. The last time I set foot in his flat had been 4 months after Edgar's death, when he invited me for supper, and having accepted the invitation, I found myself on the receiving end of an amorous advance, which I declined. He took the rejection badly, and we became as near to strangers as two people who coexist within a single building can be. My Mayfair residence is listed as a flat, but that is a little like describing Windsor Castle as the Queen's weekend boat hole. Each apartment in our building, there are 5 in total, 1 on the ground floor, then 2 on both floors above, is spread across 1,500 square feet of prime London real estate, each with 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, and views over Hyde Park that value them, I am reliably informed, at somewhere between £2 million and £3 million apiece. Edgar came into a substantial amount of money a few years after we married, an unexpected bequest from a spinster aunt, and while he would have preferred to move to a more peaceful area outside central London, I had done some research of my own, and was determined not only to live in Mayfair, but to reside in this particular building, should it ever prove possible. Financially, this had seemed unlikely, but then one day, like a deus ex machina, Aunt Belinda passed away and everything changed. I'd always planned on explaining to Edgar the reason why I was so desperate to live here, but somehow never did, and I rather regret it now. My husband was very fond of children, but I agreed only to one, giving birth to our son Caden in 1961. In recent years, as the property has increased in value, Caden has encouraged me to sell and purchase something smaller in a less expensive part of town. But I suspect this is because he worries that I might live to be 100, and is keen to receive a portion of his inheritance while he is still young enough to enjoy it. He is thrice married, and now engaged for a 4th time. I have given up on acquainting myself with the women in his life. I find that as soon as one gets to know them, they're dispatched, a new model is installed, and one has to take the time to learn their idiosyncrasies, as one might with a new washing machine or television set. As a child, he treated his friends with similar ruthlessness. We speak regularly on the telephone, and he visits me for supper every 2 weeks, but we have a complicated relationship, damaged in part by my year-long absence from his life when he was 9 years old. The truth is, I am simply not comfortable around children, and I find small boys particularly difficult.